Well, the drama in the Pac-12 between the Pac-2 and the outgoing 10 appears to be over now. We have reached a settlement. Welcome into the channel. I am John Kurtz. Here on this channel, we talk college football, college basketball, and conference realignment especially, and we do it from a Big 12 angle. Please consider subscribing if you have not. Live shows Wednesdays and Sundays. They are a blast. You do not want to miss those Wednesday and Sunday nights. And you get content like this throughout the week. So make sure you're subscribed. Click that bell so you get alerts when I am dropping content or going live. And you can like the video, totally free way to support the channel, and leave a comment in the comment section. All of that really does help me. You can also support the channel on Venmo at John-Kurtz-4. Okay, this has been buried in the midst of the Florida State news that obviously has massive ripple effects throughout college football. But we've been following the battle between Oregon State and Washington State for control of the Pac-12 against the 10 outgoing members. And in what has been a bit of an upset, things have really turned in the last couple of weeks in favor of Oregon State and Washington State, thankfully, to me. And I think many of you who are watching this channel who certainly felt the pain of Oregon State and Washington State. So I will read you here the details of this. The fight for control of the Pac-12 is over. The 10 departing schools have agreed in principle to a settlement with Washington State and Oregon State that ends 3 months of litigation and provides clarity on the future of the conference. Terms were not disclosed. And this, by the way, per John Wilner of the Pac-12 Hotline, who does a better job than anybody out there reporting on the Pac-12. Announced Thursday afternoon, the deal comes less than 1 week after the Washington Supreme Court declined to review a lower court's ruling that had established Washington State and Oregon State as the only members of the governing board. That was the part that was surprising. It was surprising that it happened that swiftly. There was not even much pushback in terms of a statement from the outgoing 10, which tells you most everybody was surprised at that decision, and that seemed to be the turning point. Well, the High Court's decision seemingly left the outbound schools with little leverage. This is actually interesting. This is very interesting from Wilner. The settlement was reached hours before the Supreme Court's ruling, according to a source familiar with the situation. So that also would tell you that cooler heads were ready to prevail. And maybe I should amend my previous statement about, hey, they were shocked by that. They may still have been really surprised by that, but they were also just ready to get it over with. It sounded like everybody was here if they were already coming to the table with a settlement before that actually happened. As part of the settlement, the 10 schools have agreed to forfeit a portion of distributions over the remaining of the 23-24 year and provide specific guarantees against potential future liabilities, according to a joint statement issued by Washington State and Oregon State. Additionally, the conference retains its assets and all future revenues. Okay, there's a lot here. So for one, we're getting a joint statement from Washington State and Oregon State basically being like, look, we got what we wanted. The judge had said Washington State and Oregon State couldn't just hoard all the money for themselves. They still had to act in the fiduciary interest of the entire league, meaning they still had to pay out some of the money to all the other schools. What has happened here is you're going to get a reduced share of that. Now, we don't have the specific details of this yet. I imagine we will probably be seeing those at some point. But we don't have the full details of how much money is being taken back by Washington State and Oregon State, what the distributions will be to those 10 schools, and then what this prevention, the terms will be with preventing Oregon State and Washington State getting stuck with all the future liabilities. And that means the House case that's in the courts right now, the Pac-12 is named as a defendant in that. They are a part of that. They could potentially be on the hook for hundreds of millions of dollars for that. That case is former NCAA student athletes suing for NIL money that they didn't get because the NIL policy was not enacted at that point in time. So lots of schools stand to be on the hook for that, but the Pac-12 in particular has reason to be worried. They also may have to pay George Kliavkoff like a buyout in his salary, all of that money. There are lawsuits from former employees of the Pac-12 still pending against the league. Oregon State and Washington State did not want to be stuck on the hook for all of that if they did basically say, hey, we're the only 2 members of the board here, goodbye to everybody else. So I'm glad Washington State and Oregon State do not deserve to be the only ones on the hook for that. A lot of the incompetence here is from leadership that failed them and is the reason that they are the only 2 that are still left around here. So it would not be fair at all for them to have to foot the bill, rather, for all of that in court with everything that is happening right now. The 10 departing schools this time did also issue a joint public comment. Quote, this agreement allows Oregon State and Washington State to maintain control of the hundreds of millions of dollars coming into the conference in future years, as we have always maintained they would, while calling for the vast majority of funds earned in 23-24 to be distributed equally among the 12 members. We will take time in the coming days to work out the final details. So I guess it sounds like they may not even know the full final details on this. It's not just a matter of not releasing them. There are probably still some pieces of that need to be negotiated. but they wanted to just get the main chunk of the agreement outlined and agreed to here. The amount forfeited was not revealed, but likely is based on the $420 million in revenue that the conference is expected to generate in the current competition year. If divided equally, a full share would be $35 million per school. Estimates during the course of the legal process had pegged a reasonable forfeiture amount between $5 million and $10 million per departing school. Combine the forfeited revenue with at least $100 million in long-term conference assets. Much of that comes from the Rose Bowl contract in the NCAA tournament. The Cougars and Beavers will have a war chest from which to support their athletic departments and compete as a two-team conference in football for 24 and 25. And a piece of that may be having some money to lure schools in to form a revamped version of the Pac-12 after that 2-year grace period that the NCAA allows. Just gives them some more flexibility. Also could just be used purely to fund their athletic departments. There are a number of different things they could be doing with that. And yes, most of the estimates, back to the estimates being $5 million to $10 million per departing school that would be taken away. Basically, think about the 10 schools, Oregon, Washington, et cetera, that are all leaving. They would make $5 or $10 million less than they would have under normal circumstances this year, and that is to help Oregon State and Washington State here in their plight. That is likely what has been agreed to. The second piece of the settlement, specific guarantees against potential future liabilities, is equally significant given that the conference faces a series of lawsuits and has expenses looming. Those expenses could include Commissioner George Kliavkoff's contract. If terminated without cause sometime this winter, Kliavkoff likely would be owed $8 or $9 million based on compensation data in Pac-12 tax filings. But the most daunting liability facing the conference is a class action lawsuit against the NCAA that could carry billions of dollars in damages and features the Pac-12 as a named defendant. Mentioned that just a minute ago. Washington State and Oregon State were concerned about having to pay an 8 or 9-figure bill after the 10 schools had left the conference. However, the settlement does not mean Washington State and Oregon State have been made whole financially following the collapse of the conference. And that is very true. I mean, that's the other thing to think here. Yes, this is a win. It is certainly an important win, but it's not going to fulfill the TV contract hole that will be there for Washington State and Oregon State in future years. That is where they will still be falling drastically behind their peers, drastically behind the 10 schools that are leaving, and why it is that everybody feels like they are essentially getting left in the dust here. So it is a win, celebrate it for Oregon State and Washington State, but it is in no way compensation for what it is that actually happened to them. In a letter to her campus community on Thursday evening, Oregon State President J.F.I. Murphy explained that, quote, "The loss of the Pac-12 media rights deal means that our financial projections for 2025 and beyond remain the same, and conference revenues alone cannot make up the more than $40 million annual gap in OSU athletics funding caused by the departing universities." Pretty well said, and is exactly why I am certainly joining Oregon State and Washington State as much as I can in this fight, and hope that things work out for the best for them. And probably the best case scenario here for Oregon State and Washington State is that Florida State has actually hastened the timeline to get us back to, hey, this is all kind of stupid. We've conglomerated too much. Why don't we just form one big giant league of the schools that really want to be serious in football and then spread it back out by region? I think that is the long-term hope for a lot of people. That would honestly be best for a lot of Big 12 schools. And if that does happen, that would, I think, be in the best interest of the future health of college sports. Whether or not we get there, I don't know. But if you're Oregon State and Washington State, I think you hope that this is just a temporary rough patch and eventually everybody gets back there. Of course, that would also require everybody near equally splitting the TV revenue, which that may be a pipe dream. But these are all conversations for another day and perhaps a live show. So make sure that you are tuned in on Wednesday nights and Sunday nights here on the channel. Subscribe so you know when it is that I am going live, when it is that I am dropping content. That's a very easy way to stay connected. If you could like the video, I would really appreciate that. If you leave a comment, I would also appreciate that. Do you think we're headed eventually down that road that I just discussed? Are you pro Oregon State and Washington State here, or did everybody get it wrong? Are the 10 outgoing schools getting screwed? Let me know in the comments. And it's John-Kurtz-4 on Venmo if you'd like to support the channel that way. You can even leave me a question or comment for a live show on Venmo with your donation to the channel there. Appreciate all of you for being here. Hope you had a great holiday, and I will talk to you all soon.